This is part 3 from Voice in the Wind, Story of a Prophet, taken from the book Eyes of Miracles. As I dove into the turquoise waters, the water felt good against my sunburned skin. As I came up to the surface, I tilted my head back and blew the water out of my snorkel tube. I had been diving and snorkeling for over 20 years now, and I had yet to become bored with the sport. As I glided through the tropical waters, I often found myself lost in another world, a world where time stood still, where each breath became a meditation that left me in a trance as I watched the colorful fish swim by. I was snorkeling in a beautiful cove in northern Costa Rica. The man at the dive shop had warned me not to go out past the end of the point. He said the reef was known for its sharks. He said every year someone was attacked and died out there. No matter how much he warned them, they never listened. Well, I had no intention of inviting danger into this enjoyable day. I could be happy snorkeling in a kiddie pool. I made sure to stay well within the cove and far away from the point. But this day had been particularly filled with lots of, boring things. Rocks, grey fish, things like that. I began swimming out a little bit farther, to get further into the rocky formations, and as I did, the fish became more colorful. I didn't know how far out to the edge of the cove that I had swam. I watched with wonder at the beautiful yellow and blue and orange fish that were dancing around in the fingers and pockets. I had been watching them for over an hour when all of a sudden I got this real uneasy feeling in my gut. There was no logic for having this feeling. I looked around for sharks, but I saw nothing. Part of me wanted to stay and continue watching this wonderful sight, but I couldn't get rid of this feeling. I finally decided to follow my intuition, and I headed to the beach. As I swam back, I started noticing that there was a long, elongated fish swimming underneath me, near the bottom. I looked to see if it was a shark, but it wasn't. As I continued on, I noticed there was another one, and then another, and then another, and before I knew it, I found myself completely surrounded in a school of giant barracuda up to 8 feet long or longer. Now I'm 5'6", but I was dwarfed by these fish. Their jaws alone were over a foot long, consisting of rows of razor-sharp teeth that were protruding out of their mouths towards me. As I looked at the jaw of the barracuda that was swimming right next to me, I began to realize the magnitude of my problem. I was right in the middle of my period, and if that wasn't enough to attract every shark and barracuda, I was also swimming in a shiny metallic swimming suit. Now barracuda love shiny objects, and now they had found a shiny object bleeding in the middle of the ocean. I was a barracuda's dream. If there were any barracudas or sharks swimming within a 100-mile radius, I'm sure they had all received a private invitation to this party. I tried not to panic. As I poked my head out of the ocean to get my bearings, the last thing I needed to do right now was to swim in the wrong direction. And being a blonde, believe me, that was entirely possible. I looked and I saw that there was a reef extending out just 20 feet away. But 20 feet felt like 20 miles at that moment. I put my head back in the water and I saw that the barracuda were beginning to get more aggressive with each other and with me. I now had to push them away at times because they began blocking me in. Now I know that sharks can sense fear by reading electromagnetic energy that we emit from our bodies, so I tried not to get scared because I wasn't sure if barracuda had the same capabilities, but I didn't want to underestimate them either. I prayed to God to help me, to cover me with His protection, with a shield of safety, because I didn't know what they were going to do. I realized as I looked at their faces that I could be looking at my own death. I knew that if one of them just took a little nibble, the feeding frenzy would start. So I began praying as I began swimming, and just then the barracuda began breaking up and scattering. The one that had been swimming right next to me suddenly swam ahead of me. My heart lifted with hope, wondering if God had spoken to them and commanded them to leave me alone. But just then my heart sank as I watched it turn around to face me. I had been in a similar situation years before when I was learning to scuba dive in the rivers of Montana. There were several pike that had apparently chased out all the other divers out of the water except me. No one had told me how dangerous they were, let alone the fact that I didn't even know what a pike was. I also didn't know that I was the only one still in the water. All I remember was how aggressive he became when I tried to spear him. He kept turning around and facing me with a face that wasn't used to being pushed around. So here I was, almost 20 years later, looking at that same ugly face loaded with similar razor-sharp teeth. I figured since my tactic worked before, I'd try it again. I stared right back at the barracuda. The others began dispersing themselves through the water, but this one was particularly interested in me. He kept his eyes fixated on me as watching my every move. I figured he must not have met a Montanian before. I figured that if I could face pike and grizzly bears that I could face this one. He now positioned himself in between me and the reef, and we both knew it. I slowly inched my way towards him, and then, cautiously around him, as his skin touched mine, as his teeth rubbed against my legs. He never took his eyes off of me, nor mine off of him. As I reached the reef, in one fell swoosh I pushed myself up and out of that water so fast. I stood now above the barracuda, which was still frozen in the water below, waiting for me to return. I watched as the others disappeared slowly into the depths of the ocean, and finally, in a sigh of relief, I let my fears come to the surface. Tears strolled down my face as I stood there trembling. It took hours for me to walk back to the beach shop because I had to keep my flippers on to keep my feet from being cut from the razor-sharp reef. My tired legs kept catching my flippers on the protruding ridges and causing me to fall, but it was better than what awaited me in that cove. When I got back to the diving office I reported a school of giant barracuda in the bay, and the man there said that I was very lucky. He said that several 15 to 20-foot sharks had been reported coming into the bay, and they had to evacuate the cove. Great whites. He said he knew that God sent the barracudas to hide me from the sharks and escort me safely to shore, but he was confused to why they didn't attack me. As I left the office he commented, saying I wasn't out there swimming alone. God must have been swimming right next to me the whole time, protecting me the whole way.